My name is Charlotte Ross. I am based in the Modern Languages Department at Birmingham. And I'm talking to you today because I have a couple of relevant roles. I'm head of the postgraduate taught programs in the School of Languages, Cultures, Art, History and Music. So that's that acronym that you see there, LCAM. And Modern Languages is based within that school. And I'm also a program convener for one of the MAs I'm going to talk about and contribute to a couple of other programs. And what I want to do is talk to you about the programs that we have that are based in the Department of Modern Languages, but they are also programs that reach beyond that. So they don't necessarily presume a knowledge of modern languages, and some of the courses are quite interdisciplinary, okay? So if you, for example, are very interested in gender and sexuality studies and you're wondering why you're in a modern languages presentation, the reason is because that program is housed in the department. So which programs am I going to talk about, first of all? So these are the programs that we offer from within the department. There's an MRes in sexuality and gender studies, an MA in comparative literature and critical theories, an MA in translation studies, and an MA in English Chinese interpreting with translation. And these are all programs that can be taken in a variety of ways. FTPT, that means either full-time or part-time. So you can see that most of these courses, you have the option of taking them full-time over 1 year or part-time over 2 years. DL means distance learning. So that means that you can apply to study without coming onto campus at all, or possibly coming maybe once in the course of the programme. And that's just available as an option for the MA in translation studies. So what I'm going to do is just briefly talk you through these different programmes, what they involve, what they focus on, how they are structured. And then I'll finish with a couple of points about the kind of support that we offer to postgraduate taught students here at the university, and particularly in our school, and then some contact details if you have any follow-up questions that you want to ask. So to begin with, the MRes in sexuality and gender studies. First of all, you may have noticed that some programs are called MAs and some have a different title. MRes means Master of Research, and it's a slightly different kind of program from an MA. As I'll be explaining in a moment in relation to the MA, this has fewer taught components. So there's more of a focus on research, and there is a longer dissertation that actually gets called a thesis. And there are also some differences in terms of fees, which it's worth you looking up on the website. So what is this program? Well, it's an excellent foundation for potentially a PhD, given the focus on independent research, or also for a range of different careers. Our students go on and work for NGOs, for think tanks, doing research in all kinds of capacities. But also some of them do go on to work as academics and take the academic career route through a PhD. The course is, as I said, based in modern languages, but it's actually incredibly interdisciplinary, and no knowledge of any language other than English is presupposed. It's taught by a strong team of research active specialists from across the university. So tutors and supervisors are based in, for example, the departments of English, history, philosophy, social policy, sociology of health, as well as modern languages, history of art, music. So there's a real range of different backgrounds and expertise coming together and looking at the interdisciplinary area of gender and sexuality studies in some really interesting ways. Some key theories and fields that the course introduces and enhances students' knowledge of include feminism, gender studies, masculinity studies, sexuality studies, queer studies, obviously. But the course also encourages students to think about these in a range of different contexts, from lived reality, social cultural contexts, to representation in media, film or literature, etc. It's a really increasingly relevant program to start thinking about, a relevant area to find out more about. And the program very much encourages students to think about the developments in critical debates and knowledge on these particular areas, for example, the history of feminist thought, but also to look at how these particular areas are fundamental as tools to understand the changing world around us today. So, for example, the course encourages students to engage with really contemporary debates like questions around the Me Too movement, around transfeminism, and around Black Lives Matter as they pertain to gender and sexuality. So what does the course look like? Well, there are 3 taught modules, so fewer taught modules than a standard MA, and then a longer dissertation, which we call a thesis, so it's 20,000 words. So there's quite an emphasis on the importance of having a good thesis proposal when students apply. Entry requirements are pretty standard for an MA, so a 2-1 undergraduate degree from a UK institution or equivalent, depending on where you've studied. And if your first language isn't English, then there is an English language requirement as specified there. So if you want more information, there's plenty of information that you can find on the website in the postgraduate prospectus. And I'm also happy to take questions afterwards when we move on to the Q&A session. So the next programme is the MA in Comparative Literature and Critical Theories, and I am the programme convener for this one. So this can be taken either full-time or part-time. Again, it's a great foundation for a PhD or for a range of different careers, depending on how you might want to use the research skills and the knowledges you might gain. There's a focus on global critical theories, on world literature, and on encouraging students to think about developing their own way into the area of comparative literature. Comparative literature, world literature, global literature, these are all labels and areas that have been defined and redefined and questioned for all kinds of important ideological and political reasons over the last century or so. We encourage students to engage with those debates and to think about how they want to position themselves within the area. It's a course that is labelled as comparative literature, but we understand literature in a very broad sense. So it could mean the critical literature, it could mean literature in the traditional sense as in fiction, but it can also mean other forms of cultural text. So there are seminars on, for example, photography, on popular music, on film as well. And we encourage students to think about how different kinds of cultural texts speak to each other, speak across different cultures. One distinctive aspect of the course here at Birmingham is that if students want to, if they have the linguistic competence, they can study texts in the source language and have supervision in that area. We can't cover every single language. There's a list of languages that we can cover, and I'm very happy to speak to you about that if you have any questions. But we don't presuppose any specific linguistic competence. It's very possible to study everything in English. Again, like the Gender and Sexuality MRes, this course engages very much with the history of thought in this area and with contemporary debates. So, for example, with the Black Lives Matter movement, or with the debates around decolonising the curriculum that are currently ongoing in the UK and elsewhere. So it's definitely a course which is on the cutting edge of thought about these areas. Structure of the course, this is much more of a standard MA. So there are double the number of taught options that you get on the MRes. So 3 core modules, one of which is a research skills module, and then 3 optional modules. And the dissertation is 12,000 words, so shorter than for the MRes. Again, the entry requirements are quite standard for an MA, and you can find out more information on the postgraduate prospectus. Now I'll say something about the programs in translation studies. So these programs do require linguistic knowledge. We offer the MA in translation studies full-time, part-time or distance learning. It is a course that I suppose is catering really to 2 different main groups of students. So students who want to become professional translators, and so they have a vocational ambition, and the course needs to prepare them for that. And also students who are thinking of perhaps an academic career in translation studies who might use this as a springboard for a PhD. The syllabus is very industry informed because we want to support the students who are seeking training as professional translators. It's recognised by the major bodies in the translation studies industry, and there's a lot of emphasis on employability skills, careers talks. We have a lot of close contacts with people in the industry, including our former students, and so it's very helpful for our current students to get a sense of what a career in translation could be like. We have really great facilities that we're very proud of that have just been recently upgraded. So there's state-of-the-art facilities and software. Some of the software that's used includes Trados Studio and EZ titles, which are used by professionals in the field. So students can learn how to use them and get practice of doing that. There is also a choice of whether or not to focus on 1 or 2 language pairings, and that depends on students' linguistic knowledge. The languages we offer, here's a list here. It's possible to translate from other languages into English, but that's currently only available as a distance learning option. And I would encourage you to contact the program convener, Emma Tyler, and I'll give you her details at the end of this presentation. So that's a list of the languages that we currently offer supervision in. So what does the program look like? There are 4 core modules and 2 options, so the same number of modules as on the MA in comparative literature, but slightly less choice, plus then a dissertation or extended translation project of 15,000 words. So for the dissertation, this is a long piece of critical reflection. The extended translation project is a translation using one of the language pairings that students have been working in of 7,500 words, plus a critical commentary about the strategies adopted. The entry requirements are a little bit more specific. So you would need to have mother tongue competence for the language into which you want to translate. And then also a 2-1 or equivalent degree for the languages from which you intend to translate. And obviously you might have specific life knowledge and not a qualification, and we can also take that into consideration. So again, more information is available on the website. And then finally, the MA in English Chinese interpreting with translation. This program is specifically for Chinese native speakers and is at the moment only available on campus. It is possible to work into other languages for the translation element of it, but not for the interpreting element. Again, we have excellent state-of-the-art facilities and software that allow students to practice both simultaneous and consecutive interpreting. And there's also a real focus on employability and helping students see their way into a career after the end of the course. It's a very similar structure to the other programs, 4 core modules plus 2 options, and then a dissertation or extended translation project. And there are the details about the entry requirements. As I explained, it's really aimed at Chinese native speakers. We hope in the future to be able to branch out, but at the moment, that's the specialized supervision that we can offer. So those are the programs. I just want to say something briefly about what's distinctive about Birmingham, why you might want to choose to study here. Obviously, you might be thinking specifically about the courses. You might also want to think about the institution as a whole. So as you probably know, Birmingham is a very well-established university that was founded in 1900 and is part of the Russell Group of universities, which is very well regarded in the UK. Internationally, it's also in the top 100 for modern languages specifically, and that's from the University World Rankings from 2019. And we're also very proud to have what's called the TEF Gold certificate, the Teaching Excellent Framework certificate, which is the best you can get, which means that there's really excellent teaching that is offered for these programs. Another thing to be aware of when making your choices about where you might like to apply is the kind of support that we can offer outside the specific teaching hours connected to the program that you might sign up for. So if a student's first language is not English, then we offer a lot of very tailored support through the Birmingham International Academy, which is part of the university, that offers support sessions all the way through the year, and they're free to any student who's registered on courses. So they might cover issues such as how to write a postgraduate essay in English, how to intervene effectively in seminars, how to engage with your supervisor, how to write a dissertation. So a range of different issues that are dealt with over the course of the year. There are also all kinds of advice and tutorials for students whose first language is English to make sure that you are doing the best work of which you're capable at this level. So tutorials on the difference between an undergraduate and a postgraduate essay, for example. How do you make the jump? How do you make sure you're using citations effectively in your writing? And there are plenty of online support materials about how to do, for example, very careful and thorough bibliographical searches, how to devise your own question for a dissertation with the appropriate kind of scope, those kind of things. It's also a very dynamic research environment for postgraduate students. At the moment, it's all a bit different because a lot of it is happening online, but there are regular seminars, there are opportunities to hear doctoral students and staff from the university, as well as external speakers, present their work. And there are opportunities for master's students to start presenting their work and think about either developing their presentational skills or looking forward to a career in academia. And one final thing to mention is just the excellent employability rates of these courses. For some of the courses, we have an employability rate of over 90%, which means that 6 months after graduating, over 90% of the students from that course are in work or further study, which is a pretty impressive achievement in the current climate. We think that's partly because students learn a lot of really helpful transferable skills, research skills, analytical skills, presentational skills that can be used in a variety of environments. So those are some of the things that you might want to be aware of when thinking about making your decision of where to apply. Now, that's all I'm going to say at the moment, apart from a list of key contacts. So if you're interested in taking any of these issues forward, if you can stay for the Q&A now, myself and Fernanda will try and answer the questions that you have. If you have specific questions about the programme that I may not be able to answer, or you want to contact the convener, here is a list of who you would need to get in touch with, and these details are all also on the web. So I'm at the bottom as a contact for comparative literature and critical theories. Then we also have Elliot Evans, who is the convener of sexuality and gender studies, Xiaowei Yuan, who is the convener of interpreting and translation, Emma Tyler, who's the convener of translation studies. And I've also put there the contact details of colleagues in music and art history, curating and visual studies. Now, those departments are in the same school with modern languages, and we do share some modules, we do share some optional modules, and there are quite strong intellectual links between the different programs. It's possible that somebody might, for example, want to study sexuality and gender studies with a particular emphasis on history of art. Somebody might be interested in comparative literature and want to look across fiction and photography. And we can offer supervision across these different areas because we have this sort of close network of colleagues working in these cognate areas. So it may be that you are potentially thinking about looking across different disciplinary areas. And if you are, then do please get in touch and see what kind of supervision we can offer.